Hi everyone, this is JP LaForest from Studio JPEG, and in this video I will be doing sort of an introduction to the different Canon cameras. I'm going to be focusing on the mirrorless camera and the DSLR cameras, and this goes with my previous video that I made on Canon lens nomenclature. So through this video I'll be discussing briefly each of the different camera types and what kind of mounts they have, so you know which kind of lenses they are compatible with, and it gives you an idea of what kind of cameras that you could look into if you're shopping for a new camera or an upgrade or something like that. So I made the following table, which I divided in 4 columns. And the first one is the smallest. And as we move to the right, we're going to be moving into the bigger and larger and more expensive cameras. So the first one is the mirrorless, which Canon will be releasing shortly. It's the EOS M camera. And that one has no mirror. So it's smaller, but something that Canon did, which most of the other manufacturers are not doing, is they did include a decent sized sensor in their mirrorless camera. So the image quality should be similar to what you have in the Canon T4i, which has been out for a couple of months already. And the EOS M camera natively only accepts the EFM lenses, though you can buy an adapter to plug in any of the EF and EFS lenses. The next category is the EF and EFS cameras. And basically these cameras have a dual mount system where you can put in any EF lens or any EFS lens on the market. And I divided them into different categories. Everybody has their own categories for this. There's no necessarily any official way of grouping them together. But there's what I call the entry-level cameras. And those have a little bit more features than what you would find in a small point-and-shoot camera. And they have the ability to change lenses. So the image quality is going to be much improved because you have access to some really good lenses. And they're really great for somebody who's just starting out and doesn't necessarily have the intention of becoming a professional photographer. The next series of cameras is the full-featured entry-level cameras. I call them like this because these cameras and anything starting from here and going onward, you could use very easily if you're an assistant to a photographer, or also if you're starting a photography career, they would be very good to start off with. And this includes, I put the names for both the European versions and the North American versions, because Canon has different names depending on where they release them. So the most recent one is the EOS 650D or the Rebel T4i in North America. And personally, I'm using the 550D or T2i for these videos. And then you have the mid-range category, which is a bit of an improvement over the Rebel series. And these cameras, they have a bit more weather sealing, they're made a bit more solid, they typically shoot faster, you can take more pictures per second with them, and they're just a little bit more expensive. So it's more for the more serious enthusiast and somebody who has a bit more budget. Then you have the almost pro category. And this one, I'm sure a lot of people will debate about it because the EOS 7D has very wonderful weather sealing. It's super solid, it's big, it has a ton of really good features, and it's really wonderful camera. The only downside it has, and the only reason I don't put it as the other pro cameras, is the sensor size is smaller, and it's the same as all the other EF and EFS cameras, and it's called an ASPC sensor size. And what that does is, if you're taking pictures or videos in the dark, it's gonna be more grainy, the image you get, as you crank up your ISO, compared to the full frame cameras, which is the next category that we'll be looking at. So the third column is the cameras that only come with an EF mount. So that's only for the bigger lenses. And I'll start with the bottom here, which is the wedding photographer full frame camera. I call it this way because most wedding photographers that use Canon, that's usually the camera they will be using, or that they will be going towards as they upgrade down the road. And that's currently the 5D Mark III, although a lot of photographers still use the 5D Mark II, and quite frankly, it's still good enough for today. And it's still good enough for at least a few years to come. And the 5D has pretty decent weather sealing. It has the full frame sensor, which means that the depth of field is very small, so you can have your subject in focus and have a very nice blurry background in the back. So that's really good for the professional photographers. Then you have what I call the pro high-speed cameras, which are the 1D series. And these are starting to talk probably cameras in the $5,000 to $6,000 range. And the same thing with the pro full frame cameras, the 1DS series. And all of those cameras, they are very good. The high-speed ones, they can take pictures extremely quickly, over 10 frames per second. And if you're doing sports photography or anything that you need to take pictures in a succession, really, these are excellent cameras for that. Whereas the Pro full frame cameras in the 1DS series, they will offer better image quality, and they would be more a direct upgrade over the 5D series. Then you have the 1DX camera, which is the newest 1D camera, and it's kind of a hybrid between the Pro High Speed and the Pro Full Frame cameras. And finally, you have the Pro Cinema DSLR camera, which is the 1DC. And this one is made more for the videographer, especially people who intend to do cinema or other high-end videos with it. And it comes in an EF mount. And that leads us to the final series, the cinema cameras. And those, physically, they kind of resemble a DSLR camera, but they are much bigger and much heavier and much more expensive. But when it comes to taking video, they are really wonderful, which is why they come in. And for this camera, you have to buy the one you prefer, either the EF mount or the PL mount. And basically, the EF mount gives you access to all the regular Canon lenses, and the PL mount gives you some cinematography specific lenses, which tend to be much more expensive, but they offer better image quality in general, and they tend to offer better ability to manually focus. So the focusing rings are going to be nice and big. And in general also, instead of measuring the aperture in f-stops, they measure them in t-stops, which includes all the modifications that the glass does to the light. So for example, if you have two lenses that are f2.8, because of how much glass is inside of it, it's actually not 2.8 that the amount of light that will reach the camera, because that glass is gonna stop some of it. So in reality, it's gonna behave maybe as a f3.1, f3.2 or something like that. But with the T lenses, then if you have a T2.8, then after all the glass is taken into consideration, you have the equivalent of an aperture of 2.8. And in that way, if you have two lenses that are both T2.8, they should give very similar exposure. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it and find it interesting, please hit the subscribe button up there. And as always, leave a comment below or questions. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. And have a great day. And I'll see you next time.